Every B-movie needs a strong title. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The Hills Have Eyes. Blood Feast. Before we've seen a single frame, the title has already painted a picture in our minds. For the audience, every film exists in two forms. The one we actually see, and the one we've already conjured up in our heads. The difference between the two can be startling. As far as titles go, The Driller Killer is pretty direct. I thought I knew what to expect at first, but the actual film is way weirder than I imagined. This is the best way to open a movie, and you can't convince me otherwise. The Driller Killer tells the story of Reno Miller. Huh, I just realized that rhymes. Moving on. Reno is an artist living amidst the sleaze and grime of 70s New York City. He shares an apartment with his girlfriend Carol and her girlfriend Pamela. It's complicated.
What are you, all fuck them? Or, who fucks who fucks what?
It's none of your fucking business here.
It's none of your fucking business.
The three of them subsist on Reno's income from painting, making their economic situation precarious at best.
Come on. I don't want to spend another night just sitting around looking at the TV. We have to. We have no money.
Maybe that's why I connected with this movie so much in college.
Why don't you call up one of your friends and go out?
Because I don't have any friends.
What are they, kidding me, man? How the hell are we supposed to pay this bill, man? What is it, for 3 months?
That's the bill for 1 month.
His mind starts to crack under financial pressure, leading to psychotic episodes and violent outbursts. Then things somehow manage to get even worse. Well, worse for Reno. For the viewer, this is where the movie really takes off. Meet Tony Coca-Cola and the Roosters. They are the latest addition to New York's punk scene. For every Ramones, there was probably a dozen of these numbskulls back in the day.
They really sound good on their album.
Album? These guys have an album?
The Roosters have rented some practice space in Reno's building. Their music is driving him insane, but no one else seems to mind.
I gotta work, man. With them guys playing, I can't work.
Look, I can work, and they don't bother me.
I ain't fooling around now. Like, you either get rid of them cats or I ain't paying the rent.
What do you mean you're gonna pay the rent? You don't pay the rent anyway.
As Reno's mental health hits rock bottom, the movie starts dropping hints that it's finally about to live up to its title. For its first half hour, The Driller Killer doesn't seem like much of an exploitation film. It's a solid indie drama about a starving artist, but that's not exactly what I expected. As a side note, I think it's hilarious how this movie is more concerned about establishing the logistics of how Reno's gonna kill people with a drill, than giving him a straightforward motivation for why he's gonna kill people with a drill. This isn't necessarily a problem, it's just weird. After all this setup, Reno finally snaps. He hardly seems to know what he's done, switching in and out of murder mode effortlessly.
Come on, this is the first time we're all going out together in months.
Yeah, look where we have to end up going.
The evening after his first kill, Reno gets dragged to the Roosters show in a local club.
We used to sit in the corner and we used to get really drunk. We used to walk home laughing and singing.
Carol just wants to have a good time, but she realizes their relationship has deteriorated beyond repair.
What's happening to you?
Reno's sick of the music and the company, so he heads outside to get some air and do some murders. The rest of the movie is a series of personal and professional disappointments for Reno, interspersed with well-staged murder sequences. It's great, but you get the idea. Let's circle back to that opening text. It's the same phrase that opens the Martin Scorsese-directed documentary The Last Waltz.
You talking to me?
Beyond that, this movie seems partly inspired by Scorsese's Taxi Driver. The Driller Killer blurs the bounds between art and trash, which is one of the main reasons I love it. Slap Scorsese's name on this movie and it would be recommended viewing in film school. Instead, we can thank director Abel Ferrara. He also starred as Reno under the pseudonym Jimmy Lane. The Driller Killer is often referred to as Ferrara's feature debut, cause apparently the previous one doesn't count. I can't imagine why. I didn't know who Ferrara was when I watched this movie for the first time, but even then I'd heard of his later work. He went on to direct the controversial crime drama Bad Lieutenant, which Scorsese himself called one of the best movies of the 90s. How's that for a success story? I'm glad Ferrara's gotten some recognition, because his work is genuinely interesting. The Driller Killer cuts between scripted scenes and documentary-style footage with little warning. The knowledge that some of what we're seeing is real makes everything a little bit more uncomfortable. Take this scene, where Reno witnesses a stabbing in the street. We know the victim and the perpetrator are actors, but what about the bystanders? And what about this ambulance? Was that planned, or did they just get a lucky shot of a real emergency? I shouldn't even have to ask these absurd questions, but this movie makes it hard to distinguish between what's real and what isn't. Then there's a scene where Reno mutilates a rabbit carcass. That's a real knife tearing into some very real flesh. Intellectually, I know Abel Ferrara didn't go around murdering random New Yorkers with a power drill, but it almost feels like he could have. The film's persistent ugliness makes its few moments of beauty stand out even more. I especially love this shot of Reno walking through a church, accompanied by theatrical lighting and moody synth music. A few great shots like this can add a lot of production value on even the tightest budget. The soundtrack by composer Joseph Delia helps a lot too. The Driller Killer was one of the last specimens of a dying breed. Let's take a trip back to the summer of 1979 to witness the end of an era. Around the time The Driller Killer first hits theaters, Victor Miller is typing up the final draft of a screenplay that will define the next decade of horror movies.
Hello? Who's that? Oh, hi. What are you doing out in this mess?
I want to be totally clear on this point. Friday the 13th did not kill the exploitation film. No, the real killer came afterwards. I blame the legion of imitators that followed.
Yes!
The early slasher films were continually experimenting, taking influence from their predecessors while adding unique flourishes of their own. That is, until Friday the 13th perfected the formula. After all, why bother innovating when the template had already been set? Audiences responded to boilerplate slashers and filmmakers followed suit. Let's not forget The Thing, one of the masterpieces of 80s horror, was a critical and commercial disappointment upon its release. I don't want to be too hard on the 80s, It was a golden age of practical effects, and it has plenty of nasty little gems to offer. I even hope to cover some of them here in the future. It's just too bad the exploitation industry ditched avant-garde sleaze for cheap thrills. I can imagine the objections to everything I've just said. Heaping praise on a movie called The Driller Killer? Honestly, I get it. Our media culture has conditioned us to dismiss this kind of movie. It's too cheap and bizarre for a mainstream audience, and too lowbrow for old school critics. It's natural, almost instinctual, for us to say, this is not art. Ignore that instinct, if only for a moment.
It's finished. I mean, you know we need the money, so why don't you face up to it?
Oh, so it's finished.
Forget about the movie playing in your head and engage with the real one in front of you.
I mean, you're telling me it's
Listen to the rage of a frustrated artist.
What do you know about paint? Tell you what you know about paint, man. You don't know nothing about paint, man. You know what you know about? You know about how to bitch and how to eat and how to bitch and how to shit and how to bitch, but you don't know nothing about paint. So don't tell me when this is gonna be done. I'll tell you when it's gonna be done.
Maybe it's the autobiographical nature of this movie that makes it work. While he was directing this film about a struggling artist in New York City, Abel Ferrara was a struggling artist in New York City. He's not known for his acting, but he lends a vital authenticity to the character.
It's 2 in the morning, guys.
That's what makes The Driller Killer so disturbing. For all its absurdity, it just feels too real. While Reno is violently insane, he's not portrayed as a uniquely evil person.
We sell this buffalo, everything is gonna change. We're gonna have enough money to do what we want when we want to.
He's just one of the many unfortunates immersed in a citywide fog of madness and cruelty. The Driller Killer portrays evil not as an external force that can be held at bay, but as a pollutant that's already saturated human society. It might as well be in the food we eat and the air we breathe. The Driller Killer is punk rock filmmaking at its finest. Punk is more than an aesthetic or an attitude, although there is plenty of both on display here. At its core, punk is creativity that resists limitations. It doesn't matter if you're inexperienced or working on a shoestring budget or if it's in bad taste, just make something. And if you're lucky, some idiot will be talking about it on the internet 40 years later.
He appears in the form of a monster.